Imagine standing beside a row of white cast-iron bathtubs arranged across a green pasture in Holmes County, Ohio. 48 of them, sitting in the shade of old walnut trees, each one filled with clear water that catches the light and holds it. A Holstein cow lowers her head into the nearest tub and drinks for a long time. The water barely ripples. The porcelain surface beneath is smooth, white, and cool to the touch even though the air temperature is 97 degrees. Now look at the pasture across the road. The grass is brown. The pond is a circle of cracked mud. A $3,000 automatic livestock waterer stands silent beside a plastic holding tank that has split along one seam from 3 weeks of direct sunlight. 26 cattle stand in the far corner, grouped in the only remaining shade, not eating, not moving, losing 2 pounds each per day because they will not walk to a water source that has nothing left to give. The farmer who owns that pasture spent $11,000 on modern watering infrastructure. Jonas Schrock, the Amish dairyman standing beside the bathtubs, spent $600. But the $600 is not the reason the water is still flowing, and the bathtubs are not the reason the herd is still gaining weight. To understand why 48 antique bathtubs outperformed $11,000 of modern equipment during the worst drought in 40 years, you need to understand 3 things: what cast iron does to water temperature that plastic cannot, why porcelain enamel stops the invisible enemy that kills livestock water in summer, and the mistake Jonas made with the first bathtub that nearly ended the entire project before it began. But we need to return to February. On a Tuesday morning in early February, a demolition foreman named Rick Stadler drove a flatbed truck past the Schrock farm on County Road 58 and pulled into the gravel lot of a farm supply store 3 miles east of Millersburg. Rick was 41 and ran a 5-man crew that dismantled old buildings across 3 counties. His current job was the Briarwood Hotel, a 3-story brick structure built in 1921 that had served as a boarding house, a county health office, and most recently a storage facility for a furniture wholesaler who had gone bankrupt. The county had condemned the building in November. Rick's company had won the demolition contract in January. His crew had already stripped the copper plumbing, salvaged the usable lumber, and removed 60 windows that a reclamation dealer in Akron agreed to buy. What remained were 72 cast-iron bathtubs. They sat in rows on the 2nd and 3rd floors, some still bolted to the original plumbing risers, others already disconnected and resting on the bare subfloor. Most were 5 feet long with rolled rims and clawfoot bases. Several were longer soaking tubs from the hotel's original luxury suites on the 3rd floor. Every one of them weighed between 280 and 340 pounds. Rick had called 4 scrap dealers. The best offer was 14 cents per pound, picked up at the site. At an average of 300 pounds each, that worked out to roughly $42 per tub, or about $3,000 for the entire lot. But the scrap dealer wanted Rick to lower the tubs from the upper floors and stack them in the parking area. Moving 72 cast-iron bathtubs down narrow stairwells built in 1921 would cost Rick more in labor and liability insurance than the scrap payment would cover. He had 2 weeks before the demolition crane arrived. After that, the tubs would be crushed inside the building and hauled to the landfill with the rest of the debris. Rick mentioned this at the farm supply counter while paying for a box of cutting wheels. Jonas Schrock was standing 4 feet away, buying kerosene for his shop lanterns. Jonas was 56 years old, lean and quiet, with a gray-streaked beard and the kind of hands that showed every decade of work without complaint. He ran a 60-cow Holstein dairy operation on 120 acres of rolling pasture connected by a gravel lane to the county road. Jonas did not say anything right away. He paid for his kerosene. He walked outside. He placed the jug in his buggy. Then he stood beside the horse for a long moment, looking at nothing in particular. His wife, Miriam, would have recognized that pause. It was the same pause Jonas made before buying the 80 acres of hill pasture in 2009 that everyone said was too steep to fence. It was the same pause he made before rebuilding the barn roof with salvaged hand-hewn beams instead of buying new lumber. Jonas thought slowly. But the things he decided after thinking slowly tended to remain decided for a very long time. He walked back inside and asked Rick one question. Are the drains still open? Rick looked confused. The drain holes, in the bathtubs, are they open or sealed? Most are open. Some still have the old brass hardware. How much for the lot? Rick blinked. You want all 72? How much? I would take 600 cash if you remove them yourself. When can I start? Tomorrow. I will be there at 7. Rick shook his hand. What are you going to do with 72 bathtubs? Jonas picked up his kerosene. I am going to find out. The next morning, Jonas arrived at the Briarwood Hotel with his 2 oldest sons, Levi, who was 28, and Samuel, who was 24. They brought 4 hay wagons, a team of Belgian draft horses, a block and tackle, heavy rope, and enough oak planking to build ramps down the stairwells. Moving 72 cast-iron bathtubs out of a condemned building is not romantic work. Each tub had to be disconnected from its remaining plumbing, tilted onto a padded plank, slid down the oak ramp 1 stair at a time, guided through a doorway, and lifted onto a wagon using the block and tackle. Levi and Samuel could each handle one end of a 300-pound tub for short distances. For the longer tubs from the 3rd floor, they used the horses. By the end of the first day, they had moved 26 tubs. By the end of the 3rd day, all 72 sat on the 4 wagons in the hotel parking lot. Rick watched them load the last one. 3 days for $600 worth of scrap iron. It is not scrap, Jonas said. Then what is it? Heavy. Rick laughed. The wagons reached the Schrock farm at dusk on the 3rd day. Now look at the yard from above. Jonas arranged the 72 tubs in 8 rows of 9 along the east side of the main barn, sitting on wooden blocks to keep them off the frozen ground. Each tub rested upside down, so snow and ice would not collect inside during the remaining weeks of winter. Every tub received a chalk number. Miriam recorded the numbers in a ledger. Samuel measured the length, width, and depth of each one. Levi checked the exterior for cracks, deep rust, and damage to the porcelain enamel inside. The neighbors noticed within 48 hours. In a community where every piece of equipment on a farm serves a visible purpose, 72 upside-down bathtubs beside a barn demand an explanation. Harlan Brenner, who farmed 160 acres across the road, leaned on the fence Saturday morning and studied the rows. Jonas, did you buy a hotel? Just the bathtubs. All of them? All of them. What do 72 bathtubs do on a dairy farm? I have not decided yet. You bought 72 bathtubs and you do not know what they do? I know what they are. I do not know what they can become. Harlan shook his head slowly. $600 for the world's heaviest lawn ornaments. At the Millersburg feed store the following week, the story had already traveled. The Amish farmer on County Road 58 had bought 72 old hotel bathtubs and could not explain why. Tom Jessup, the county agricultural extension agent, heard the story from a dairy supply salesman. Cast iron tubs for livestock water? That makes no sense. You can buy a 100-gallon Rubbermaid stock tank for $79. It weighs 11 pounds. You can move it with one hand, and you hose it out in 2 minutes. He bought 72 of them, the salesman said. Then he bought 72 problems. Cast iron rusts, the enamel chips, the drain leaks. You cannot move a 300-pound tub when a pasture gate needs to shift. And in winter, standing water in cast iron will freeze and crack the whole thing. That last point was the one that should have worried Jonas more than it did. The plan forming in Jonas's mind through the last weeks of winter was not complicated. His farm drew water from a deep limestone well that had never failed in the 31 years his family had used it. The well produced clean, cold water year-round because the limestone aquifer sat 240 feet below the surface, far deeper than the shallow wells and surface ponds that most of his neighbors depended on. But moving that water to 6 separate pasture areas required either carrying it by hand, running a gasoline-powered pump, or building a gravity-fed system using the natural slope of the land. Jonas had no electricity. He had no gasoline pump. He had land that sloped from the well house at the top of the hill down through 6 pastures to the creek bottom, and he now had 72 heavy, watertight vessels with built-in drains. A bathtub holds approximately 40 to 50 gallons of water depending on size. 48 bathtubs, each holding 45 gallons, would store 2,160 gallons of accessible water across 6 pasture areas at any given time. Each tub could be connected to the next by a short section of pipe running from the overflow of one to the inlet of the one below it, creating a continuous gravity-fed chain that would refill automatically as cows drank. The clawfoot bases would keep the tubs stable on uneven ground. The porcelain enamel interior would prevent the water from taking on a metallic taste, and the drain plugs would allow Jonas to empty and clean each tub without tipping 300 pounds of cast iron. The plan was sound. The first test was not. On the first warm day in late March, Jonas and Levi carried tub number 14 to the upper pasture and set it beneath a walnut tree. They connected a short length of old galvanized fence pipe from the well house valve to the tub's overflow port. Jonas opened the valve. Cold well water ran down the pipe and filled the tub in 11 minutes. The water sat clear and still. The porcelain gleamed. Jonas placed his hand flat against the outside of the cast iron. The metal was cold. Not just cool. Cold. The cast iron had been sitting in the shade for 6 hours, and its thick walls had absorbed the cool temperature of the morning air. When the 50-degree well water entered the tub, the metal did not warm it. It held the cold. Jonas left the full tub overnight. The next morning, the air temperature was 31 degrees. He walked to the upper pasture at 6:15 and found tub number 14 cracked. A fracture ran from the drain hole to the rolled rim on the left side. Water had seeped through the crack and frozen in a thin sheet beneath the tub. The porcelain enamel along the fracture had separated from the iron in a jagged white line. Levi examined the crack. The water froze. The water expanded, Jonas corrected. The iron could not. Should we drain every tub before a freeze? We should, but this one had a weakness before the water found it. Jonas carried the broken tub back to the barn. He placed it in the center of the assembly area, where he and his sons would see it every morning. Then he took a piece of red chalk and drew a line along the crack. If you have been watching this channel, you know what a red line means in an Amish blacksmith shop. It means the material failed before the farmer did, and it means the failure will not be hidden. The red line tub taught Jonas 3 things. First, every cast iron tub would need to be inspected not only for visible damage, but for invisible weaknesses that a freeze could exploit. Old cast iron develops internal stress over decades of heating and cooling. A tub that held hot bath water for 60 years had been thermal cycled thousands of times. Some would be stronger for it. Others would be waiting for one more expansion to let go. Second, the tubs could not remain full during freezing weather without protection. Jonas would need either a way to keep the water moving or a procedure to drain them before hard frost. Third, the drain plugs mattered more than he had assumed. A tub with a faulty drain that could not be emptied quickly was a tub that would crack in the first unexpected freeze of autumn. Over the next 2 weeks, Jonas, Levi, and Samuel inspected every remaining tub. Watch the numbers. 72 purchased. Tub 14 is the first loss. 71 remain. Levi taps every surface with a small hammer, listening for the clear ring of solid iron versus the dull sound of a hidden crack. Samuel tests every drain by filling the tub with 6 inches of water and watching for seepage underneath. Jonas examines the porcelain enamel inside each tub. Where the enamel is intact, the iron beneath is protected from rust and the water stays clean. Where the enamel has chipped, bare iron is exposed. Small chips can be tolerated. Large areas of missing enamel will rust quickly and contaminate the water with iron oxide. Now watch the rejection count climb. 4 tubs have hairline cracks discovered only by the hammer test. The cracks are not visible to the eye, but the sound is wrong. Jonas marks them with red chalk. 3 tubs have drains so corroded that the brass hardware cannot form a seal. Water leaks continuously from the bottom. 2 tubs have large patches of missing enamel covering more than 1/4 of the interior surface. 4 tubs from the 3rd floor luxury suites are longer soaking models that are too large to sit stable on the pasture slopes without custom supports that Jonas does not have time to build before summer. 13 tubs are rejected. 58 remain from the original 72. Jonas sorts the 58 into 3 weight classes. 34 standard 5-foot tubs weighing between 280 and 300 pounds. These are the primary water vessels. 16 slightly lighter tubs with shallower walls. These hold less water but are easier to position on steeper ground. 8 heavy double-wall tubs with extra thick casting from the original hotel kitchen and laundry areas. These are the most durable but also the hardest to move. Samuel builds a chart on the barn wall. 58 chalk squares in 6 rows, 1 row for each pasture area. Jonas assigns 8 tubs per pasture for the 4 main grazing areas, 6 for the smaller upper pasture, and 6 for the creek bottom pasture where the ground stays wettest. That totals 46 assigned tubs and 12 reserves. But Jonas knows from tub 14 that reserves are not luxury, they are margin. In April, the installation begins. Now look at the upper pasture. Jonas selected the placement of each tub based on 3 factors: shade, slope, and distance from the gravity pipeline. Every tub sits beneath a mature tree. Walnut, oak, and maple canopies shade the white porcelain from direct sunlight during the hottest hours of the day. This is not decoration. Direct sun on a dark-colored water container raises the water temperature quickly, but the white porcelain reflects sunlight and the tree canopy blocks it entirely. The water stays cool even when the air does not. The tubs sit on level patches of ground prepared by Levi with a shovel and a carpenter's level. The clawfoot bases grip the packed earth and prevent rocking. Samuel drives short oak stakes beside each foot as additional anchors against livestock bumping. The gravity pipeline is the simplest part of the system and the part Jonas is most proud of. For 3 years, Jonas had been collecting old galvanized fence pipe from neighbors who were replacing their fencing with new materials. He had accumulated over 800 feet of 1-inch pipe stored in the barn. He connected these pipe sections into a continuous line running from the well house at the highest point of the farm, down through each pasture, using the natural 2% slope of the land to move water without any pump. Each bathtub connects to the main line through a short branch pipe entering through the overflow port. When a cow drinks and lowers the water level, the gravity pressure from the well above automatically refills the tub to the overflow line. The system has no moving parts except the main valve at the well house. No electricity, no pump, no float switches, no timer. Water flows downhill. Cows drink. The well refills the line. The line refills the tubs. Total cost of the pipeline, $0. The pipe was free. Jonas already owned the well. Total cost of the tubs, $600. Total cost of installation labor, 3 weeks of Jonas, Levi, and Samuel working between morning and evening milking. Across the road, Harlan Brenner had invested differently. Harlan ran a 160-cow commercial dairy and beef operation. His water system included a $10,000 submersible electric pump, a pressurized holding tank, 1,200 feet of buried PVC supply line, 4 automatic livestock waterers at $2,000 each, and 3 500-gallon polyethylene storage tanks positioned in the open sun. Total investment, approximately $22,000. The system worked well when it had electricity, when the PVC lines did not crack, when the plastic tanks did not become so hot in summer that the water grew green with algae. By late May, Jonas had 46 bathtubs operational across 6 pastures, connected by the gravity pipeline, each one holding 45 gallons of clean, cool, shaded water. He kept 12 tubs in reserve beside the barn. Then summer arrived, and it did not bring rain. June recorded 1/4 inch of rainfall across Holmes County. The 30-year average for June was 4 1/2 inches. July was worse, 0.06 of an inch, effectively 0. By the 3rd week of July, surface water across the county had largely disappeared. Creeks that had run year-round for decades slowed to a trickle and then stopped. Farm ponds dropped below their intake pipes. Shallow wells that drew from the upper water table fell to levels that triggered pump shutoffs. The temperature climbed above 95 degrees for 17 consecutive days. This is the moment when the bathtubs proved their first invisible advantage. A dairy cow drinks between 30 and 50 gallons of water per day. In extreme heat, that number rises toward the upper end. Insufficient water intake causes immediate drops in milk production, weight loss, heat stress, and in severe cases, organ failure. The temperature of the water matters almost as much as the quantity. A cow will drink significantly more water when it is cool than when it is warm. Studies from dairy science programs across the Midwest have established that water above 80 degrees Fahrenheit reduces voluntary intake by as much as 20%. Cattle will stand beside a trough full of warm water and refuse to drink enough to maintain their body weight. Plastic tanks absorb solar radiation and transfer it directly to the water. A black polyethylene stock tank sitting in full sun on a 97-degree day can raise water temperature above 90 degrees within hours. Even light-colored plastic tanks reach the mid-80s by afternoon. Cast iron behaves differently. Cast iron has a property called thermal mass. It absorbs temperature slowly and releases it slowly. A 300-pound cast iron bathtub sitting in the shade of a walnut tree absorbs the cool temperature of the morning air and holds it deep in the metal walls. When warm air surrounds the tub later in the day, the iron resists the change. The thick metal walls act as a thermal buffer, slowing the warming process by hours. The white porcelain enamel on the interior surface reflects sunlight rather than absorbing it, adding another layer of thermal protection. And the fresh well water entering through the gravity pipeline was naturally cold, 52 degrees at the wellhead, year-round, because the limestone aquifer sat far below the zone affected by surface heat. Jonas measured the water temperature in his bathtubs at 2 o'clock on the hottest afternoon in July, 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Samuel drove across the road and measured the water in Harlan's plastic holding tank at the same time, 82 degrees. 18 degrees of difference. Jonas's cows were drinking cool water and maintaining their intake. Harlan's cattle were standing beside warm water and refusing to drink enough. By the end of July, Jonas's milk production had not dropped. Harlan's had fallen by 30%, but temperature was only the first advantage. The second was biological. Warm standing water in a plastic container with sunlight exposure develops algae rapidly. The microscopic green organisms thrive in warm, still, light-filled environments. Within days, a neglected plastic tank can develop a green film that reduces water palatability and, in heavy concentrations, can cause digestive problems in livestock. Harlan's crew was scrubbing his plastic tanks every 3 days to keep the algae under control. In the drought heat, the algae returned within 48 hours of cleaning. The porcelain enamel inside Jonas's bathtubs created a surface that algae struggled to colonize. The smooth, non-porous glaze offered no microscopic footholds for biological growth. Combined with the cooler water temperature and the continuous slow flow from the gravity pipeline, the bathtub stayed clean with minimal maintenance. Jonas scrubbed each tub once a week with a stiff brush and clean water. Harlan's crew was spending 2 hours every 3 days fighting algae across 4 waterers and 3 holding tanks. The third advantage appeared during the windstorm on August 4th. A severe thunderstorm with straight-line winds exceeding 60 miles per hour crossed Holmes County without dropping meaningful rain. The wind struck Harlan's pastures at 4:15 in the afternoon. One 500-gallon polyethylene tank, empty because the well pump had been cycling on and off due to low water table, was picked up by the wind and thrown 40 feet into a fence line. It cracked along both seams and could not be repaired. A second tank, partially full, rocked hard enough to separate from its supply line fitting. 120 gallons of water poured onto the ground and disappeared into the cracked earth in minutes. Jonas's bathtubs did not move. 300 pounds of cast iron sitting on clawfoot bases anchored with oak stakes cannot be relocated by wind. The storm passed over the Schrock farm and found nothing light enough to lift. After the storm, Jonas walked every pasture and checked each tub. 46 operational. All 46 still level. All 46 still connected. All 46 still holding water. But the drought was not finished testing. On August 11th, the temperature reached 101 degrees. Jonas's cows increased their water intake toward 50 gallons each per day. With 60 cows spread across 6 pastures, total daily consumption exceeded 2,800 gallons. The gravity pipeline could deliver approximately 3,000 gallons per day from the deep well. This was adequate, but the margin between supply and demand had narrowed to less than 200 gallons per day. If any tub developed a leak, the lost water would reduce the margin further. On August 14th, Samuel discovered that tub 31 had developed a slow drip from the drain plug. The old brass fitting had corroded enough to allow approximately 1 gallon per hour to seep through. 24 gallons per day wasted into the ground. Jonas replaced the brass plug with a hand-carved oak stopper wrapped in beeswax. The leak stopped, but he also pulled tub 31 from the active line and replaced it with reserve tub 65. 11 reserves remained. On August 20th, Levi found a chip in the enamel of tub 42 that had not been there during the spring inspection. A cow had struck the rim with a hoof while drinking. The chip exposed bare iron the size of a quarter. The exposed iron began to rust within 2 days. Rust-colored water collected in the bottom of the tub near the chip. Jonas pulled tub 42 and replaced it with reserve tub 58. 10 reserves remained. He repaired tub 42 by cleaning the exposed iron, coating it with food-safe linseed oil, and placing it back in the reserve line. The repair would hold for a season, but the tub would never return to the primary group until the patch proved stable through a full winter freeze cycle. By September 1st, the drought had lasted 73 days without significant rainfall. The County Extension Service issued an emergency bulletin advising livestock farmers to reduce herd sizes to match available water supply. Cattle auctions across 3 counties saw a surge of animals being sold at distress prices by farmers who could not keep them watered. Harlan Brenner sold 18 head at a loss. Tom Jessup, the extension agent who had said Jonas would be better off with plastic stock tanks, drove out to the Schrock farm on September 3rd to see the bathtub system for himself. He arrived at 10 in the morning. The temperature was already 91 degrees. Jonas walked him through the upper pasture. Tom saw 8 white bathtubs sitting in the shade of walnut trees, connected by the galvanized pipe, each one filled with clear water. 3 cows stood drinking calmly from different tubs. Tom placed a thermometer in tub number 7. 62 degrees. He placed the same thermometer in a plastic emergency tank that the county had distributed to farmers the previous week. 84 degrees. Tom wrote both numbers in his notebook. Where does the power come from? There is no power. The pump. There is no pump. The well sits higher than the pastures. The water flows downhill. Tom looked at the pipe running along the fence line. Galvanized fence pipe. Free from neighbors who replaced their fencing. And the bathtubs were $600. For 72. I used 46. 12 are in reserve. What happened to the other 14? Jonas pointed toward the barn. 13 were rejected during inspection. 1 cracked in the first freeze because I left water in it overnight before I understood the risk. You kept the cracked one? It is in the barn with a red chalk line. Why? Because it was the most expensive lesson in the project, and I intend to keep paying attention to it. Tom closed his notebook. The county spent $40,000 distributing emergency water tanks to farms across the district this summer. Every one of them is plastic. Every one of them has an algae problem. Most of them are in full sun because there is no infrastructure to connect them to a shaded position, and none of them can hold temperature below 80 degrees in this heat. I did not build this to compete with the county, Jonas said. I know, but the county might need to learn from what you built. Tom visited 3 more times that month. He brought a soil scientist, a water quality specialist from the Ohio State Extension, and a dairy nutritionist. Each one measured the water temperature, examined the enamel surfaces, tested the gravity flow rate, and asked Jonas the same question Harlan had asked in February. Why bathtubs? Jonas gave each of them the same answer. Because the county was throwing them away, and I could not see why. The rain finally arrived on September 19th. 1 inch fell overnight, then 2 more inches over the following week. Creeks began to flow again. Ponds started to refill. Shallow wells recovered. The drought had lasted 91 days. During those 91 days, Jonas's milk production never dropped below 94% of normal. His herd gained weight through the entire summer because the cattle drank cool water voluntarily and ate normally. Harlan's herd lost an average of 112 pounds per animal. His milk production dropped by 30%, and did not fully recover until November. Across Holmes County, the total livestock economic loss from the drought was estimated at $1.6 million. Jonas's loss was 2 bathtubs pulled from service and 1 cracked in March. On a cool Saturday in early October, Harlan walked across the road and stood beside the fence where he had made the lawn ornament comment 7 months earlier. Jonas was replacing the straw bedding in the upper pasture shelter. He saw Harlan and walked over. Harlan looked at the row of bathtubs. The cows were grazing peacefully. The water was still flowing through the gravity pipeline. The porcelain still gleamed in the afternoon light. Jonas? Harlan. I sold 18 head this summer because I could not keep them watered. You did not sell one. I had water. You had bathtubs. The bathtubs held the water. The well supplied it. The hill moved it. The shade kept it cool. The enamel kept it clean. I just put the pieces where they belonged. Harlan looked at the ground for a moment. How much would it cost me to set up something like this? You have electricity, Harlan. You have a good pump. You do not need bathtubs. My pump needs the grid. My grid failed 3 times this summer. My plastic tanks cracked in the heat. My automatic waterers need power to open the valves. When everything needs electricity, everything fails at the same time. Jonas leaned on the fence post. Your well is deep enough? 200 feet. Good limestone water. Your land slopes to the south pastures? About the same as yours. Then you need a gravity backup. The tubs are one way to hold the water. The pipeline is what moves it. The shade is what cools it. And the enamel is what keeps it clean. If any one of those is missing, the system does not work. Harlan nodded. Do you have any of those reserve tubs left? Jonas looked toward the barn. 10. Could I buy 5? You can have 5, but I will help you place them correctly. A bathtub in the wrong spot is just a heavy thing in a field. That is what I called them in February. I remember. I was wrong. Jonas smiled. You were not wrong about what you saw. You were wrong about what they could become. Over the next 2 weeks, Jonas helped Harlan install 5 cast-iron bathtubs as a gravity-fed backup system in Harlan's 2 south pastures. They used Harlan's existing well, connected a bypass gravity line from the pressure tank outlet, and placed each tub beneath a shade tree. Harlan kept his electric system as the primary water source. The bathtubs sat quietly beneath the trees, full of water, waiting. They did not need to wait long. In November, an early ice storm knocked out power to the county for 4 days. Harlan's electric pump went silent. His automatic waterers froze. But the gravity line to the 5 bathtubs kept flowing because gravity does not need a power grid. Harlan drained the tubs each evening before the hard freeze and let them refill each morning when the air warmed above 32 degrees. He lost no cattle. He lost no production. The 5 bathtubs did not replace his modern system. They gave him something his modern system could never provide on its own, a backup that worked when everything else stopped. By the following spring, 7 more farmers in the county had contacted Jonas about cast-iron tub installations. Jonas did not sell bathtubs as a product. He visited each farm, measured the slopes, identified shade positions, tested well output, and helped the farmer understand that the bathtub was not the system. The bathtub was one component. The system was gravity, shade, enamel, cast iron, clean water, and the patience to inspect every piece before trusting it with a life. Tom Jessup wrote a 2-page case study for the County Extension newsletter that winter. He titled it simply, Alternative Livestock Watering, Gravity-Fed Cast Iron Systems in Holmes County. The paper described Jonas's installation, the temperature measurements, the algae comparison, the storm durability, and the 91-day drought performance. It did not call the bathtubs a miracle. It called them what they were. A heavy, simple, well-placed answer to a problem that expensive technology could not solve when the power went out and the rain stopped falling. Now take one final look at the Schrock farm. In the barn, the cracked tub from March still sits with its red chalk line. Jonas's sons walk past it every morning. On the wall beside it, a chart shows 72 starting tubs, 13 rejected during inspection, 1 cracked in the first freeze test, 4 pulled during the drought, and 46 that served through the entire 91-day emergency without failure. In Miriam's ledger, the original purchase is recorded as $600. The pipeline cost is listed as 0. The equipment replacement cost during the drought is listed as 0. The herd loss is listed as 0. And across 6 pastures, beneath walnut trees that have shaded that ground for longer than anyone can remember, white bathtubs sit in the grass, with cool water catching the light. They held hotel guests for 60 years. Now they hold the reason a herd survived. If this story made you think differently about the heavy, old, discarded things that most people drive past without stopping, subscribe to the channel. Then tell us in the comments. Would you have seen 72 problems headed for the smelter, or 72 answers waiting for the right question? The demolition company saw weight it did not want to carry. Jonas saw something the weight was protecting, and the drought proved which one of them was right.